Magic's ability to reprint and revitalize classic cards, mixing the old with the new, is a huge part of the game's allure and success. Seeing old classics mixing and mingling with new cards being enjoyed by many new players for the first time are one of the most exciting things about the entire game. And with Magic's newest baseline set, Foundations, many of these cards are making a huge comeback. Foundations is a new type of introductory set for Magic the Gathering. What makes it so exciting is what it has to offer every type of Magic the Gathering player. If you're a newer player, Foundations is a perfect mix to get started with classic cards that are simple, streamlined, and evocative of what the game is capable of. If you're an experienced player, Foundations is a beautiful melding of old and new, bringing back old favorites while taking a step towards the future. But the best part is that every card in Foundations will form the backbone of Standard for the next 5 years. This means that you can invest in a deck and keep working on it and upgrading it over time as you build your collection. My name is JimDavis, and I've been a full-time Magic the Gathering content creator for 10 years now and an on and off pro player for 20. And today I'm here to show off some amazing reprints and Foundations, letting you know how they fared back in the day and what to look forward to now. Where else could we possibly start but with Llanowar Elves, one of the most iconic and classic Magic cards of all time, and perhaps the best card in the entire Foundations set. Of course, Llanowar Elves came out in Alpha, and the 1-mana Mana Dork has been a staple of Magic the Gathering for many, many years. Birds of Paradise, Elvis Mystic, Avacyn's Pilgrim, a kind of card that hasn't really been in Standard for quite a while now because of just how powerful it really is. Llanowar Elves gives you a huge jump on mana as early as turn 1, making it so easy to look at every single 3-drop basically in all of Standard and think, how good would that card be on turn 2? Llanowar Elves is super exciting. There's a bunch of elf stuff in the set also with cards like Elvish Archdruid and Dwin's Elite, making Llanowar Elves just super exciting all around. If you haven't cast turn 1 Llanowar Elf in your life, you should. I highly recommend it. Next up is another classic from Alpha, sort of. Wrath of God is the classic 4-mana sweeper from Alpha that kind of defined what a board sweeper was like in Magic the Gathering. Being able to kill all creatures at once for an AoE type effect is a big deal. And Day of Judgment is the kind of cleaned up version from a core set from a long time ago where it removed the can't be regenerated text, which doesn't really matter too much these days. So it makes sense why they would choose Day of Judgment in this core set over Wrath of God. A little less rules baggage, but 4-mana kill everything is a very, very powerful effect. You're playing a control deck, you're playing kind of a mid-range deck looking for a sweeper, or you got to kill all those aggro creatures like Llanowar Elves. Day of Judgment is here to do it at a rate we haven't seen in a long time. We've seen a lot of 5-mana sweepers in Standard in recent years. Sunfall, Fumigate, and Friends. The clear, no drawback 4-mana sweeper have not seen since Supreme Verdict. So this is a very, very exciting one. Also a big pillar of the format for the next 5 years where control decks will have access to this and creature decks got to watch out for it. One of the most important things any creature deck player needs to learn is how to play against sweepers, and this one's a classic. Speaking of classic cards from Alpha, what about the good old Unsummon, all right? 1 mana, put that back in your hand, a great lesson in tempo. So of course, Unsummon is a card that does not trade evenly on resources. You know, if I play a Doomblade on your creature, I lose a card and you lose a card. Whereas Unsummon, I lose a card, you get the card back into your hands, you don't actually lose it, but the tempo here is the important part. So decks looking to exchange a piece of cardboard for a little bit of time, love Unsummon. Blue tempo decks, maybe a combo deck looking to kind of just stay alive, or a blue deck that doesn't really have better removal spells, trying to just get a creature off the board and do its thing. We've seen Into the Floodmaw from Bloomburrow seeing play in Standard, but Into the Floodmaw can only target your opponent's creatures, whereas a lot of the utility Unsummon comes from being able to save your own creatures. So if they're playing creatures, you get to bounce them. If they're not playing creatures and they're playing cards like Day of Judgment or other removal spells, when they cast that, you can target on your own creature, put it back in your hand, and save it for later. So, very flexible card. It's simple, but super effective and really, really awesome to see back in the format. Our next classic is not quite from Alpha, but one of the most iconic red cards of all time, Ball Lightning, which I am super excited for. Red, red, red for a 6/1 creature with trample and haste that dies at the end of turns. This is a creature that plays like a burn spell, right? So you can Lava Spike your opponent or Lightning Bolt your opponent. Ball Lightning is a similar idea, right? You play it, you attack for 6, and they take 6 damage. Maybe they can block it, but the trample, of course, pushes through the damage, and the haste means it's a surprise attack. But it goes away. It's only a one-shot deal, but 6 damage for 3 mana is quite the deal. It'll be interesting to see how Ball Lightning stacks up in the modern day Magic scene, where creatures are a lot better, but burn spells are a lot worse. You know, we don't really have Lightning Bolt anymore, obviously. So Ball Lightning is a big one. Mono red is basically always a big deal, and we're going to see this card legal for a long time. Very exciting for red players, and honestly, it's just awesome to see a card like this back in Standard. As far as 2 other cards from Magic early days, just want to point out that Serra Angel and Shivan Dragon were absolute powerhouses way back in the day on school lunchroom tables and in the early days of Magic. These days, we've seen a lot better creatures, obviously, but it's really cool to see newer players learning with these classic cards, which is awesome. Speaking of angels, we have a returning duo here that is quite powerful in Lyra Dawnbringer and Giada Font of Hope. Now, Lyra often plays like a Baneslayer Angel. Baneslayer Angel being one of the hallmark cards from a while ago. That's like the big time threat. This is a control deck stream, 5/5 lifelink first strike angel. You plop it down, your opponent can't attack through it, and you start gaining life back and turning the corner. So when Lyra was originally around, this is kind of what it saw play as, just like an extra Baneslayer Angel. There weren't really a lot of angel things happening, but the set has kind of a life gain theme and an angel theme, and we've seen more angel cards coming into play recently, with Giada being one of the biggest ones from New Capenna. 2 mana for a 2/2 angel that taps for mana to cast angels and also buffs all your angels too. And looking back at Lyra Dawnbringer also has this buff angel effect where it pumps all your other angels and gives them lifelink, which is a huge deal, making them all mini Baneslayer angels too. So there are a lot of really awesome angel cards in the set, both reprints and new cards, but Giada and Lyra are the big deal to kind of put it all together. You know, Giada being the enabler and then Lyra being the top end hammer to do the thing. So these are really, really exciting ones. It's cool to see them in a new context, especially Lyra, where that last line of text really matters. If you're a little more into evil stuff rather than angels, check out Desecration Demon, an absolute staple from when it was legal last time around in mono black devotion decks. This is a huge undercosted creature, a 6/6 flying creature for only 4 mana, but as a drawback, your opponent can sack their creatures and tap it for a turn so it can't attack, but it will make it bigger. So they can kind of give an offering to a demon and placate him for a turn or so, but that's a good exchange for you as well. Now, this was a powerful card back in the day, just as a big, huge creature, but important to note there's a bit of a demon theme in Duskmourn, with cards like Unholy Annex paying you off for having demons in play, making Desecration Demon a pretty cool marriage of old and new. So this is definitely one to watch out for in Standard if you like black decks. But what if you're a red player and aren't really into burn spells and like creatures? Well, there are a lot of awesome goblins coming in Foundations, especially none other than Krenko Mob Boss, one of the all-time classic goblin legends. 4 mana for a 3/3, you tap Krenko and you get X goblins, or X the number of goblins you control. I don't do math very well, but that's exponential, folks, all right? So say you have 4 goblins in play, and a Krenko, you tap it, now you have 10 goblins. Next turn, tap it, now you have 20 goblins, and obviously that can go on pretty crazy from there. So there are a lot of ways to give Krenko haste in Standard, which is a very important part of the card, being able to use it immediately. And then, of course, there are Goblin Lord pump effects, like Runveld Hordemaster, that can make all your goblins bigger. So if you like controlling a huge order of creatures and having a bunch of stuff in play, you like goblins, which I do too. Another cool thing about Foundations is the kind of the return of Planeswalkers. So Planeswalkers are a major part of Magic and have been since Lauren first introduced them a long time ago. But we've seen a bit of a reduction in Planeswalkers in the recent years, where the War of a Spark set kind of gave us a lot of Planeswalkers at once, and then Wizards went back to doing only 1 Planeswalker per set. Well, there are 5 Planeswalkers in Foundations, which is awesome. And one of the really exciting ones is a reprint, Vivian Reed. And Vivian's a really awesome green Magic card for all you mid-range players out there. It's a 5 mana Planeswalker. When you plus it, you get a land or a creature, which is awesome, so it creates card advantage. You can minus it to kill an artifact, enchantment, or flyer. There's a bunch of awesome enchantments in Standard right now from Duskmourn, great artifacts as well. And we've already previewed a bunch of awesome flying creatures like Lyra and Desecration Demon, meaning Vivian Reed is a way to draw cards and kill things your mid-range decks want to do, and that ultimate ability will pump the team for a big win. 2 more great cards for you mid-range players that are awesome reprints are Scavenging Ooze and Maelstrom Pulse. I'm sure Reduke's out there somewhere watching this, hopefully going, Jund stuff, I love it. These are both classic mid-range cards. Both saw play in Jund decks back in the day, but also in other decks as well. Scavenging Ooze is a phenomenal creature. It's cheap and allows you to exile cards from your opponent's graveyard. This can break up their Delirium and other graveyard synergies, while also gaining you life and making Scavenging Ooze bigger. The longer the game goes, the bigger the ooze grows. That's exactly what a mid-range deck wants to see. grinding it out, killing things, making the ooze bigger, and then overcoming. And the life gain helps out against those burn decks too. Whereas Maelstrom Pulse is a super flexible removal spell. So most removal spells we see can do some things, but not others. Go for the Throat can kill a creature, but not an artifact creature. Destroy Evil can kill an enchantment or only a certain size of creature. So most removal spells have these restrictions to make them cheap and efficient, but don't cover all the bases. Well, Maelstrom Pulse will kill just about anything. Destroy target non-land permanent. It is sorcery speed and 3 mana, so it's a little bit clunky, but the versatility you get is huge. You can kill planeswalkers, artifacts, and everything else in between. And it has some pretty awesome text on it where it will destroy each other card of the same name. So if your opponent's playing a bunch of scavenging oozes, boom, they're all dead. And this works really well against tokens. So if your opponent's playing a token deck, you can target their 1 night token and kill all the night tokens. A very, very powerful effect as far as cleaning up multiples. Also a card that kind of changes the way your opponent plays the game. They might think twice about playing that second Overlord because they don't want to risk losing both to only 1 card. So it's a powerful card. It's a fun card. It creates fun subgames. Love me a Maelstrom Pulse. But what about players who want to go big? Well, there are quite a few big cards here in Foundations. Omniscience being perhaps one of the most exciting. This is a 10 mana blue enchantment. Yeah, I said 10. You heard me right there. And what do you get for 10 mana? Well, I'll tell you. Never spend mana for anything ever again. Omniscience simply says that all of your spells are free going forward. And of course, once you hit that point, you can do some pretty crazy stuff. So ideally, you'll find someone to cheat Omniscience into play or ramp it out. But once it's in play, you can go nuts casting card draw spells and whatever else. Other boom booms in the set include cards like Progenitus and Darksteel Colossus, 2 all-time classic huge creatures in Magic's history. And if you like big stuff, they got you covered here in Foundations. But of course, we have to have ways to keep these big spell players honest, right? You gotta be aggressive. We've seen Ball Lightning as a relic from Magic's distant past. Well, Magic's middle period had a phenomenal burn spell named Boros Charm, which has been a hallmark of modern burn since back in the day. And Boros Charm does the important thing that any modal card needs to do. So we see these charm kind of cards fairly often in Magic. They give you kind of a variety pack of options. It's really important for a modal card to be playable to have one of the options be excellent. Well, Boros Charm says instant speed, target your face for 4 damage, which is a phenomenal amount of damage to get for only 2 mana, and not an effect we've seen really very often in Magic's history at all. But wait, there's more. Billy Mays here to tell you all about the second and third modes on Boros Charm, which can save all of your permanents with Indestructible, or give a creature double strike, which is huge with cards like Slick Shot Show Off in the format. So Boros Charm is going to be a big deal for burn decks and for aggressive decks. If you're at 4 life, watch out. So how do you fight the burn decks? How about gaining some life? We've got a really awesome reprint here. I kind of wish we got Armadillo Cloak because I'm a real boomer, but Unflinching Courage is just as good. This is a 3 mana aura that can give your creature lifelink, trample, and +2/+2, which is a huge boost. And there are a lot of cool enchantment synergies and aura synergies happening in Standard right now with Duskmourn and the Eerie mechanic and much, much more, as well as protection spells like Snakeskin's Veil, which can keep your creature safe. One of the biggest risks about an aura is you put it on a creature and they kill it and you get 2 for 1, but these protection spells can help keep your creature safe. And then once you've built this Ultron mega creature that's like a 10/10 lifelink, it is very, very hard to lose. So Unflinching Courage is very, very exciting. Looking forward to see where the enchantment decks go. But don't forget, Tournament Magic isn't just about playing 1 game. It's often about playing 3 games with a sideboard. A sideboard is 15 cards you can have with your tournament deck that you can use to swap in and out for games 2 and 3 of a match in a tournament. Think of it like a bench on a sports team where you have a specialty player on the bench who's really good at running or, kicking long field goals or whatever. And when needed, you can swap those into your deck. Sideboard cards are extremely important in constructed play and in tournaments and can be a defining feature of what can make a deck a winner or not quite good enough. We've got a bunch of really exciting sideboard cards in Foundations to help you build your sideboards. Knight of Grace is a card you could see in your main deck in theory as a 2/2 knight with first strike. It has hexproof from black, meaning they can't cast Cut Down on it, they can't cast Go for the Throat on it, and it has the text of if your opponent controls a black permanent, it gets a little bit of a power boost, making it a 3/2. Now, it's important to note that this also counts any black permanent in play. So if you have a black permanent, you're playing a black-white deck, Knight of Grace can get a boost as well, which is cool. But the big thing here is how good this card is against black removal decks. Black removal decks are extremely good in Standard right now, again, with cards like Cut Down and Go for the Throat, and being able to play a creature that can rumble, can deal some damage, and get through blockers, and is also hard to kill is a big deal. However, as far as traditional sideboard cards go, there aren't really many better ones here than Flash Freeze and Deathmark. These are two cards that saw an absolute ton of play the first time around, first debuting in the Cold Snap expansion, and whenever they've been legal, they've been a really, really big part of the format. Flash Freeze is a 2-mana instant. It can counter any red or green spell. Period. That's it. No instant or sorcery. No, I can pay in a mana to get the spell through. It's just counterspell for red and green spells, which is, of course, unbelievably good against red and green decks. Who would have thought, right? So, red and green decks often want to go big with big creatures or have that game-ending burn spell to kind of kill your opponent, and this can stop all of those. Flash Freeze is going to be a big deal in Standard for the next 5 years, obviously, out of any blue sideboard. So, if you're a red or green player and scared of this, look for cards that can't be countered, as there are a few of those as well. We've also got Deathmark, which is one of the most brutally efficient kill spells available in the entire format. If your opponent is playing green and white creatures, 1 mana. That's it. To kill any green or white creature. The only downside here is it is a sorcery, not an instant, so it's a little less flexible, but being able to kill your opponent's large green or white creature for such a cheap cost makes cards like Lyra Dawnbringer or Gigantosaurus look a little silly, and this is one you gotta watch out for if you're playing green and white decks because it is a extremely powerful card. Whoa boy, that was a lot of cards, but there are, of course, many more both reprints and new cards that make up the entire Foundation set, which will lay the groundwork for Standard for the next 5 years, which is extremely exciting. Standard has been perhaps the best format in Magic now for over the last year or so, and it's great seeing it get even more love and support. So, what are you waiting for? Hop on to MTG Arena and get playing. And don't forget to get involved in Arena's premier play events like qualifiers for the Arena Championship, and my favorite, the Arena Opens, high-stakes 2-day events paying out $2,000 to top finishers. So once again, I'm JimDavis. Big thanks to Wizards of the Coast for having me to do this video. Make sure you like it, you comment, you subscribe on it. Let me know your thoughts about Foundations and what reprints you're excited for. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.